Hello all, James here. Now, we are going to have to talk about news that came out about 24 hours ago, and it was written by quite a lot of wrestling news websites. Maybe all coming from just a simple miscommunication or misunderstanding from a podcast from Bro Down, one of Vince Russo's many podcasts that he does every week. This one's with Mac Davis. Anyway, it seems that the story is that Vince Russo had announced that he was writing now for Billy Corgan's NWA promotion. Does that seem realistic or not? I mean, I don't know. Apparently, Billy Corgan is no Vince Russo hater. Seemed fairly realistic at the point, but there was a bit of misunderstanding from the podcast itself. Now, we're going to go to it, going to listen to that little portion of it. Go into it like this, right? Mac Davis and Vince Russo. Mac Davis here is the co-host, I guess, and he is saying, I heard you were going to write for this company. And then Vince Russo agrees. But then Mac Davis says, but then I also heard this company, and then they get into it. Vince Russo, it sounded like he was confirming the NWA, but if you listen to it again, it sounds like that. So I don't blame any of the wrestling journalists out there or wrestling websites, news websites from reporting it this way, because that's exactly what it sounds like. That being said, you can sort of see like the facetious nature of how they're saying it here.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I know who it is because I heard Disco and Conan talking about it. And you're going to be going to the NWA. You're writing for the NWA.
They got that right, man. But
or MLW. Maybe that was the other one I heard too. That you might be. Yeah.
Mac, I got to tell you this.
And then I'll continue anyway. Vince Russo then says, I've already written 9 shows. Somebody gets concussed in the first episode. There's testing and administering of testing for whatever reason. Female wrestler who's in danger of losing power then pulls the Me Too card, all in the first 9 shows, etc. Right. Here's the thing, though. If you sort of listen to it with that lens that I just sort of like, that with the preamble I gave you, you can kind of see where the idea was that he wasn't actually saying NWA, but he totally agreed to it, but kind of agreed to like, yeah, kind of thing. Anyway, let's go back to it. A lot of people apparently got the wrong end of the stick. Coach, who's friends with Russo, says, why do we continue to throw stuff against the wall and hope it sticks? This story's so far off, so wrong, absolute fiction, how do I know? I did what no one else in wrestling media ever does. I actually called my partner and asked him, novel concept. I already knew the real story, but I thought I'd double check. Stop reading headlines, most always false when it comes to wrestling headlines like this. And that is referring to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer, talking about that story, of which I'm going to give you some quotes. You've heard as much as I have, but it sounds like he being Vince Russo, is going to work for the NWA. What does it matter? It's the NWA. It's like, how can he make it better or worse? NWA has, they don't have any television. That's anybody's watching. I guess they have a YouTube show. Now, this is all going to come up in a minute again. I'm going to refer back to these quotes. But once again, Dave Meltzer, I don't think is in the wrong, and you won't hear me say that all the time. Billy Corgan was never anti-Russo, but it's NWA, and unless they get viable television, it's kind of a moot point. He then goes and says that having Vince Russo associated might help them with a television deal, even though, the success of Steve Austin in the Attitude Era is about 28 years ago. And then he says NWA doesn't have that young guy like Javon Evans that everyone needs to catch. And anyone who's good is under contract somewhere else. So, it doesn't really matter what Russo does unless there's TV and a real platform. Well, less than 24 hours later, Vince Russo decided to dispel the rumours. Say the rumours. Once again, if you listen to the clip yourself, you can see why everyone thought that. So I'm not blaming anyone here. Once again, and not NWA, you marks are still getting worked after all these years. And then continuing on, I hope you now believe me about the dirt sheet media led by infallible Dave Meltzer. I have no idea where the NWA even came from. Well, it was your podcast. Not me, of course. It sounded like it was you. That's the entire point. But anyway, not even bothered to call me to ask. This is exactly what I've been saying about wrestling journalists for years. I'm now a proud investor at JCW Lunacy, which is Juggalo Championship Wrestling, which is, I guess, why he was at that gig right there. So there you go. The actual story is Vince Russo is going to be writing for and an investor in Juggalo Championship Wrestling, which I didn't realise had any kind of weekly show at all. But there you go. I didn't realise a lot of places didn't have weekly shows, which I'm going to get to in a minute. Now, under Jonathan Coachman's post on Twitter, we're going back again. Brian Idle, who is the NWA World Television Champion. Yeah, good. Unable to get television. And once again, I read them how they're written. We have a major deal on Roku. In reality, Russo had to use the buzz of the NWA to give the rub to another promotion because he's smart enough to know the value. Dave Meltzer is a know-nothing mark. And I'm going to refer to that quote again a few times, actually. I think it says a lot about the NWA that Vince Russo used it for clout to swerve to promote another company. He didn't, obviously. We've already established that. I'm proud of what the NWA has accomplished. And then this one, this is just word soup. Case and point, we have out TV and indie comma promotions and many of the same buildings that we've run in. I'm not even going to try and decode that one. Okay, but we need to stick with this quote here. Unable to get television, we have a major deal with Roku, right? Buzz of the NWA as well. That's something that's going to be coming up again and again and again. Okay, major deal with Roku. Dave Meltzer keeps his eye on pro wrestling and especially media deals, right? I'll give that to him if nothing else. And ratings and everything like that, he seems to be quite obsessed with, even if he does make many ridiculous excuses as to why AEW ratings are doing so bad. And NXT's ratings that aren't that much better, he doesn't give any of the same caveats to, or very few anyway. The point is that if Dave Meltzer doesn't realise that NWA and Billy Corgan struck a deal with Roku, then I check the news every single day. I collate news for various podcasts, including my own YouTube channel that I talk about stories. I had no idea that the NWA had signed a major deal with Roku. And if I don't have an idea, and Dave Meltzer didn't have any idea, he still thought it was on YouTube. I still thought it was on the CW app, I guess, or maybe it had moved back to YouTube. And I'll pretty much guarantee, unless you're an absolute hardcore fanatic pro wrestling fan, and even if you are, you probably didn't know either. Practically nobody knows. So once again, let's go back to this other quote. In reality, Russo had to use the buzz of the NWA. Right, there's two things I need to talk about there. One, Vince Russo, we just saw the clip, he wasn't using the buzz of the NWA. It was a throwaway line by his co-host that he sort of unwittingly kind of confirmed by not meaning to. He wasn't doing that on purpose. And then in Vince Russo's tweet, he says the NWA name didn't even come from him, which I guess technically is true, but you know what I'm saying. The buzz of the NWA. The NWA has absolutely no buzz whatsoever. And do you know what? Case in point, here's many bits of proof. This is probably the first time you've even been reminded that there's a promotion called the National Wrestling Alliance still out there doing shows, I guess, in months. It really is. It really is. You just... The promotion, or the promotions, because they've got like smaller feeder territories, I think they're going for now, has absolutely no buzz whatsoever. And I'm going to once again refer to Vince Russo's comments. Let's go back to the top. They don't have any television, I guess they have a YouTube show. Well, guess what? I'm pretty sure most people thought the same thing. And Roku's not a major deal. The CW Network app was not a major deal. You were better off just being on YouTube because at least more people at the time would have considered watching it. Here's a little NWA history, recent history anyway. 2 years ago, and keep in mind that the NWA as an entity was dead in the water once again. We're not talking about the pre-COVID times with the Great Set and all that kind of thing. I'll get to that in a second. Around Halloween of 2023, the NWA ran a pay-per-view called NWA Samhain. It's spelt Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain, apparently. It's like a Celtic or pagan word, and it's related to, Halloween kind of thing. Anyway, the promotion at that point was dead in the water. Even more dead considering that there was probably more people in the building watching it than actually bought it on pay-per-view, which apparently might have been as low as under 300 people buying it. That's how, under the radar NWA was then and is even more now. Now, the only reason that pay-per-view is remembered, it's remembered for two reasons. One, it was, for anyone who reviewed it, a horrible show. Every review I've seen basically just said it was a terrible show top to bottom. And two, and I'm not blaming him for this because I'm a big fan of Father James Mitchell, but there was a segment that turned into a series of segments that went through the show in between matches, is that Father James Mitchell was in the crowd, had a big, circular bar table with a bunch of misfits around him, and he dumped a massive bag of beak on it. Whiff. You know what I'm saying? The devil's dandruff, all that kind of thing. And then they all start hoovering up that bugle like there is no tomorrow. Anyway, CW Network executives reportedly, now we don't know if this is true or not, but reportedly, saw that and were so angry about it that they pulled the NWA Power Show deal from the CW network linear, broadcasting network broadcasting deal. Now, WWE at the time were also courting CW network to have NXT on the show, on the network, excuse me. So anyway, the NXT show is, of course, on CW network now. And eventually the NWA was relegated to the CW network app, which I will guarantee practically nobody watches because it's not on anybody's streaming destination. I'm absolutely sure of that, or very few people's anyway. It's like Fox News Nation with Eric Bischoff's amateur wrestling thing. It kind of just doesn't make sense. It would have made more sense to stay on the YouTube channel and hopefully get more visibility on the product. We'll get to the YouTube thing in a minute. Anyway, the follow-up to that is that Billy Corgan also was doing a reality show that I guess he'd funded himself and then was shopping around, that also ended up on the CW Network app and once again was sparsely watched along with the show. And ever since NWA, the NWA Sarwin thing, the NWA has been just delving further into obscurity ever since. And it's a shame it is, but that's the fact. Once again, I'm going to give you a challenge here. Apart from, a succession of champions nobody wants to see, from Cyrus and I guess EC3, didn't change people's fortunes, but Cyrus was like the old, was he called Cyrus? Tyrus, I'm sorry. I wrote Cyrus down. How forgettable he is. I forgot his name. Anyway, Tyrus was like champion for like a year, and he was only champion, I guess, despite the fact he was 50, he couldn't move very well, was because he was on that Fox show, Garfield or whatever it is. I can't remember what that is at the moment. I'm having a terrible time with. We don't get it here, or if we do, I've never watched it. Garfunkel. Anyway, it's hosted by Art Garfunkel. It gets good ratings, right? But here's the thing of just like how low a profile that the NWA has now. Tell me who the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion is. I'll wait. I'll time it for you on my impossibly orange phone, if you like. Okay, right, you've had enough time then. It's the former Bram from the Ascension in WWE, Tom Latimer. I believe he was also married to Charlotte Flair, I think. Maybe, I don't know. Or maybe that was someone else, who knows. Anyway, let's go back to Meltzer's comment here. I want to get to. The NWA doesn't have that young guy like a Javon Evans that everyone needs to catch. And he's right. And everybody else is under contract. Now, they do have some interesting people, a few interesting people who are not young. We're talking Rich Swann made his debut in the NWA. Jim Mitchell is still part of managing, and once again, he's great. But EC3 still there. Amazingly, the Pope Elijah Burke is with the NWA. Once again, I want most of all what I mentioned, the former Damien Sandow, now Aaron the Idol Stevens, because he was underappreciated even when he was with WWE. I thought he was really good, a really nice fella as well. Now, the reason I'm saying all that is because the claim that, Russo is using the NWA's cachet, their buzz, is kind of laughable for several reasons. One, the NWA has no buzz. Two, Vince Russo didn't even realise that he'd said the NWA or the NWA was mentioned. So, no, there's complete falsehood there, quite frankly. And I can't harp on this enough, but I'm going to harp on it a bit more, because if you look, once again, if this Roku deal was so amazing, where the heck is everything here? Damn it, one sec. Okay, I've sorted it now. I don't know, I just look, I've already recorded this once and I made a right pig's ear of it, so this is me recording it again. Just as an example, the celebration of 200 episodes with the NWA got 30,000 views on YouTube, right? And let's go to some of the videos. This is the last 12 videos on the NWA YouTube channel. Now, if this Roku deal was such a mega deal, or if the CW Network app deal was any good whatsoever, we would see, once again, more buzz, more social media interaction, and just as importantly, YouTube channel interaction as well. It's all a rich tapestry. It all weaves into each other, and you can really tell how much buzz or elsewise a company has from their YouTube views. So once again, let's go from here. The only one that is even remotely worth mentioning here is the Pope, former Elijah Burke, is back. 35,000 views it got. I don't know if you can see that, but there it is. Everything else, 9,000, 3,000, 2.4 thousand, 12,000. That's Elijah Burke again. Rich Swann debuts, 3.2 thousand. That was 20 seconds. Well, probably no wonder no one wanted to watch that. 11,000, 2,000 with the Kentucky Colonel there. An NWA World Heavyweight Title Defense, 13 days ago, 9.8 thousand views. 2,000, 4.5, and 1.4. That was 5 days ago. Are you seeing the point I'm trying to make here? Is that, I mean, actually, if you saw my channel there briefly when I flipped over the camera, right, I get more views on average. I'm some dude in his spare bedroom talking about this, and I get more views than the NWA. It's nuts. If you have buzz as a promotion, or you're trying to big yourself up or have major TV deals, you're not fooling anyone with this one, quite frankly. So the reason why I'm sort of going so hard on the NWA is actually because of Brian Idle defending it so vehemently, which is admirable because, look, he works for the NWA. He wants to, see it do well and everything. But really the point is I'm trying to make is that I don't know what the NWA needs to do to sort of climb out of this pit of obscurity that they found themselves in, the more obscure than MLW, GCW, Ring of Honor, crikey, I mean, Defy Wrestling in the Northwest. There's loads of promotions that the NWA is now currently doing less, garnering less interest in, quite frankly. And it's such a shame because when the NWA sort of reformed in its current guise, or, its current run of shows anyway, pre-COVID, those sets were great, man. The throwback to the old Mid-Atlantic or Georgia Championship Wrestling sets with the desk and the flags and everything like that. It was well lit. And here's something else. Once again, with Dave Meltzer saying there's no Javon Evans or anything like that. Well, do you know what? At the time there was. I mean, it all led with Nick Aldis, who was the champion. He was someone you could take seriously. He looked like a champion. He worked like a champion. He spoke like a champion. And he created real buzz for himself. And look where he is now. He is the GM at WWE SmackDown. He's one of the most featured performers, even if he doesn't wrestle at the moment. I'm sure he's in great shape and can wrestle at any time. But, and hopefully he will one day if that's what he wants. But, you had everyone from Eddie Kingston, who still wasn't getting shots at the time, all the way to Ricky Morton, who was still doing hurricanranas at 178 years old, which is still, incredible as well. And I say that with all love to Ricky Morton. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that's when the show last had some buzz, right? 2019, 2020, then the COVID times happened, production shut down, they tried to bring it back, then it all of a sudden got really cheap. The studios were horrible. The names started going to AEW and WWE or TNA or wherever they were going, and they were basically left with practically nothing. A few recognizable faces from WWE of old, so I'm going to give you, apart from Father James Mitchell, which is most associated with, of course, TNA or ECW or maybe even WCW for what was his name? It's the same as the one in the Witches of Eastwick. Anyway, the Jack Nicholson character. And once again, Rich Swann has turned back up. EC3, Elijah Burke, Damien Sandow. These dudes are holding down the fort, but there's no one young to look out for anymore, or there's no one creating that buzz once again. Now, I'm mentioning all that because the last time I watched NWA Power with all those R's was in 2023, and it might have been in conjunction with the NWA Sarwin pay-per-view. I can't remember. Anyway, I watched an entire episode, and the idea was for me to get ideas to talk about the NWA to interview Trevor Murdoch, who I think at the time was NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I bet not many of you knew that or even remembered that if you did know it. Luckily for me, he no-showed my interview, only like the second person who's ever done that, which is fine by me because honestly, I could not think of anything to ask him. But that being said, the show that I watched was just lighting-wise, it was so depressing. It was so dank, so dark, so done on a shoestring budget that I thought it was going to die then. I'm surprised it's still going now. And actually, I'm kind of happy that at least you can see the lighting has much improved. Quite frankly, the thumbnails aren't that bad either. The YouTube, whoever's doing the YouTube is doing a decent job of presenting stuff. But once again, you're presenting stuff for a promotion that is dead in the water at the moment. I don't know what anybody can do, Billy Corgan or anybody else, to start getting buzz for the National Wrestling Alliance or the TV shows again. Saying that you've got a major deal with Roku isn't fooling anyone, because obviously no one's watching it, because no one's watching the YouTube, no one's talking about it. First time anyone's talked about it for months, I'm sure, NWA, people have forgotten it existed. But here's the actual point, is that quite frankly, the NWA bringing in Vince Russo as their writer could hardly make things worse, quite frankly. This is the most buzz they've had in months. Do you know what? Give it a go. It'll be funny if nothing else. And that's pretty much my point here, is I don't get the whole sort of spinning it that, you know, Vince Russo's smart because he's invoking the name of NWA to promote. It was a complete accident. Anyway, Vince Russo is not writing for the NWA. It was a weird podcast, not even a misunderstanding, basically a misspeak, I think would be fair to say. He's actually writing for Juggalo Championship Wrestling. I hope that clears everything up. I hope you enjoyed, or at least put up with, my very brief downfall of NWA thing that kind of turned into. Hopefully, you know, they'll get the buzz back. I don't know how they're going to do it, quite frankly. Maybe Ed Ferrara's out there. Maybe they could hire him. Until the next video, though, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.